everyone, it's Jan from Jan Plans Things, and welcome to my Plan With Me video for August week 4. So you can see I've always used little tools or whatever I really had around for drawing my little templates, and you just saw me using a little washi tape that time around because I wanted something small in the middle. I have to thank my London gifties for giving me that little washi tape. So my idea for this week was to do kind of like an orbiting theme with planet Earth in the middle, and then have like fun little space objects orbiting around planet Earth, and because I quite like the orbit lines that I did the previous week around the kitty, and I'm going to also add a small little animal just to make it a little bit fun. And I think this week I'm going to make it a little bit bluer to change up the color a little bit, as well as still use the golds to keep the theme going and the cloud, but I think I'm going to use a radial dial version of the layout this time. So I've tried to do a variety of layouts for you during this month. So I kind of did a linear column layout in, I think that was week 2, and then varieties of like just a little bit more free-flowing layouts with the cat, and then also like a column in the center. So I'm trying to vary it as much as possible so you guys can kind of see the different variations in the types of layouts that I like to use in my bullet journal. This one's quite fun because it's kind of like a radial design. So what I've used just now, this is the Sakura Micron pen. So I'm going over in the 0.8 first. It's a bit reverse to what I normally do. Normally I would draw it out with the 0.1, but I looked at the design that I've done and I had more things to do in the 0.8 than I did in the 0.1, so I thought I'd go around and do the larger layouts, the larger lines first, and then I'd gone back in and with the 0.1 Sakura Micron and then just done the little details. So the little details are kind of like the bubbles around the penguin, the little details in the planets, like the countries. I had to pause for a second there because I couldn't remember what the planet looked like, and I kind of just like made it up so that it sort of looked like the right thing. And then just the orbit lines are also all done in the 0.1. So I quite like this one. It's kind of like fun. It looks a little bit like, you know, one of those neutron diagrams that you did in science school, where just with a little bit more like whimsical objects around it. I used a brush there to try and get all of the little erasing markings out of the spine of the notebook. So I just used a dried brush, and I find that really handy every now and again because sometimes you just get those tiny things stuck in the center of the notebook. So I was actually a little bit lazy this time around because like I could have probably, sorry, my cat again. I probably could have avoided painting the entirety of the planet with the masking fluid, but I kind of just wanted to have it a little bit easier when I was doing the cloud behind it. So what you can see me doing now is just dotting in the little stars that I'll have just like differentiating itself within the cloud. I also painted the little satellite and anything that was touching the cloud that I was doing with the masking fluid to make it easier to have a more even wash. And once again, I'm using that technique that I spoke about in my watercolor tutorial, which is painting the little circles. You can see that when I kind of get to the spine, I kind of just stop because I'm worried about the paint actually falling into the spine and then staining some of the threads. So I always try and dry off the area around the spine as much as I can. I'm just working around in a dial, so I'm using the little indigo blue that I have and I'm mixing it with a little bit of the Daniel Smith Moon Glow, which is a beautiful purple paint. You can see me using it there, but it has a lot of granulation in it, so it's kind of like splits and goes a little bit bluey purple, so it gives it a nice little tinge. But at this point I realize I've kind of gone purple blue, purple blue, purple blue, and it looks a little bit like a propeller. So I've gone back with a little bit of the Moon Glow mixed with black actually, and then just darkened the center of the cloud a little bit to give it a little bit more definition. So just continually painting the circles, and I'm just layering it up to make it a little bit darker. So those of you who use Photoshop, it's kind of like using the multiply technique where you're just putting a whole bunch of overlays one on top of the other. So then I tried to paint the penguin, but I wasn't 100% happy with the colors. I kept on darkening it, and then I also had a little disaster where the paint kind of ran past the penguin. So I was just trying to water down that edge so that it wasn't so pronounced that it had kept running. So I think in the end it looked okay. So you know, I've actually made quite a few mistakes in this layout, which you'll see soon as well. So I wanted to change up the color theme a little bit this week. So also using the blue background, because I had a pinky purpley cloud last week. I mixed a couple of brighter colors for the planets, but because I wasn't 100% sure which colors I wanted first, and because the gold was so prominent, I painted the gold first so that I could have that really apparent while I was painting, and then I matched the colors to complement the gold and the blue. So one of the tips I have is, if you're doing like a whole bunch of complementary colors, to lay down the two, or first the main color that you'll be using, and then then match the rest of the colors to that. So the most overpowering colors are actually well matched already. So I had actually used the slightly lighter gold first, but I didn't like how it was a little bit streaky. It wasn't as opaque as the other gold I was using, so I've gone back and I've just gone over the gold a little bit more, and I find that by just slowly layering the gold a little bit by little bit, what you actually get is that kind of like foily effect with the fine tech paints. So I'm also looking forward to using the Kuru paints soon, so we'll see how they compare, but at the moment the fine tech paints are doing really well, especially because they don't bleed through the paper. So what I'm doing now is I'm using a 0.1 like really fine brush, just going through with the dark blue that I used before and just dotting the edges of the cloud to add that little bit of of interest around the edges. So it looks, I find that it looks a little bit like a meteor belt, but what I've been doing the last couple of weeks is joining those lines together to make little constellations. Again, because it was a really prominent part of the drawing, I wanted to draw these dots first, because they're in the dark blue color, before I actually painted the rest of the planets, because I had painted the purple one and the orange one. I wasn't 100% sure if they were properly matched with the blue yet, so I went in and put all the other elements in first. I also find, because I've limited my palette to those 16 colours that I use all the time, 16, 17 colours that I use all the time, I'm getting quite used to which colours to mix and which colours are quite complementary. You can kind of see I've gone back over the red planet and just made it a little bit darker because I was worried it was a little bit too washed out. And what I'm doing now is using the little Tombow mono eraser to just get in those little details and just push all of the masking fluid over. I wouldn't recommend using a really big eraser for something like this, because you can actually damage the surface of the watercolor. So unless you're like quite precise with it, this one works a little bit better, especially when you're doing little stars, because you can just really gently push the edge of the star off. So, and now after that, I've just gone back with the Sakura Micron and just outlined the moon a little bit more, because it was a little bit, it had been a little bit covered by the metallic, and the metallic colors are really, really opaque. And this is like, I think it's already week 4 of my space theme, and I'm still really, really having fun with it. I hope you guys aren't sick of it yet. It's quite fun with the amount of things you can do, and you can be a little bit whimsical with it like I am. At the moment, I'm using the silver fine tech. I don't use it often because it's not as bright on camera, but I wanted to put a silver lining to the cloud because I'm a little bit corny like that. So that's like the silver lining to every cloud, yay. So with this one, at the moment, I'm painting the ocean of the planet, and I wanted it really bright and opaque. And to do that with the watercolor, what I'm doing, you can see, is I'm actually dipping it directly into the paint. So I've got barely any water on my brush, and by dipping it directly into the paint, you kind of get like a really, really rich pigment. And you can see the blue that I'm using is a little bit transparent, because you can kind of see the streakiness in it. I'm actually mixing some black onto the surface of that just to make it a little bit, just to make it pop a little bit more, and I wanted to avoid the streakiness. And at this point I kind of realized that the penguin was a little bit too light, he was looking a bit washed out, so I've used that blue again to darken him up a little bit. At this point I was a little bit worried because the blue was so strong that it might be a little bit too much for the page, but once I added the green, I was actually really happy with how this turned out, because the planet just made the whole page pop a little bit more, and the green really ties in well with the gold, moon and the stars, so it kind of really pulled the entire color scheme together. So sometimes I'm not sure, and I'm always testing it, but I'm just finding that it's okay with the watercolors to go back and layer it a little bit just to adjust the colors to make it match a little bit more. So sometimes, because I wasn't using the regular blues and purples that I was all the time, and I wanted to introduce some things a little bit more different, it was a little bit more experimental while I was mixing the colors this time around. But I find it looks, I'm quite liking how poppy and bright it is. So after leaving that to dry a little bit, I'm just using the Sakura Microns again to do my little header on the top corner, just to like say which week it is. And you can see I'm kind of like hovering my hand over the paper, and then I screwed up. I just realized that I can't spell Wednesday, so I've just taken a spare piece of the LT paper that I had. Like I tend to have, you know, the perforated pages at the back, I kind of cut a little rectangle out of it, so when I've made a mistake I just paste over the top, and you can't really tell once you paste it over the top, so it's no big deal. But you do kind of feel bad afterwards because you're like, oh look, I screwed it up, but you know, it always happens. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this plan with me. I really enjoyed using it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks a lot. Bye!